Hello, everybody. Welcome. And in this lesson, we would be talking about inflation and deflation. I would like you to check in the description section the book that I would be using in order to help me elaborate and explain more about inflation and deflation. So you can follow up with the book that I wrote in the description from page 353 to 373. Consequences of inflation. Now remember, governments often aim to keep inflation in their economies at a range of 2 to 3% per year. Okay? And low inflation, it is beneficial for the economy because consumers will be encouraged to buy goods and services sooner rather than later, as delaying will mean they will have to pay more for the same product. Now, also, so this was the first reason. This is the benefits of an economy. I will be explaining the second advantage of low and stable price inflation, and it makes borrowing more appealing. Why? Because the interest rates are also usually low during periods of low inflation. So, for example, inflation and interest rates are low and stable. Firms will be more optimistic and more confident to borrow more money in order to invest in new plant and machinery. Okay, so it will reduce the real cost of loan repayment. However, so remember, this could be used as a discuss question. However, now we will be talking about the disadvantages of inflation, and I will be talking about the first one. Inflation erodes the value of purchasing power of money. So remember, if I have $100,000, it will today I can buy an apartment. If inflation was occurring, it means everything became more expensive. So what the $100,000 that I used to have before, it will not be enough for me today to buy an apartment. Okay, so it is very difficult for people with low and fixed incomes because they cannot buy as much as they did before with their incomes. And the demand for many products will fall. Why? Because I'm not getting an increase in my income, guys. The second reason, it increases the cost of production and reduces profit margin. So from the firm's point of view, from the producer's point of view, all the factors of production became more expensive. So the cost has increased. Remember, cost, this is a factor affecting my supply curve. So if the cost of production increases, what will happen to my supply? My supply will decrease. So it will shift to the left. Also, it reduces the price competitiveness of exports. Since, for example, let's say in the UAE inflation was occurring, so everything became more expensive. If it is expensive if dates became more expensive in the UAE, it will be difficult for the UAE to export its dates to other countries because it is considered to be expensive. The fourth one, it creates economic uncertainty, so you do not know what will happen. You don't know what is waiting for you later on. So consumers, firms, and governments will be uncertain about their future costs and the impact of rising inflation could have on their incomes and revenues. So at that point, the firms will reduce their investment and they will, so they're not investing anymore automatically. The production is decreasing, so they do not need to hire as much labor as before. And since unemployment is increasing, consumers will be decreasing their spending. Now, there is one term, it's called stagflation. What does it mean? It is an economic situation when unemployment and inflation are both high or rising. So this is a very bad situation in the economy. Now, let us talk about the costs of inflation, but I will start with the personal costs. Okay, personal costs of inflation, so how it will affect me as a person. So to me, the disadvantage would be I'm getting a low income workers will be worse off since they cannot ask for higher salaries. I do not have any skills in order to take advantage and ask for a higher salary. So what will happen is I will be forced to um, I will be forced to work with a low salary, and thus my purchasing power will become less. The second one is people who save their money. Remember, I gave you this example before. So when I saved my money in Lebanon before the crisis, before inflation occurred, it was considered to be a good amount of money. And I told you before, the $100,000 that I saved, it was equivalent. Every $1 was equivalent to 1,500 Lebanese lira. So that was okay. I was able to buy an apartment. Today, after inflation, this rate changed. Every $1 today is 9,000 Lebanese lira. So this $100,000 today, it is approximately equal to $16,000. So see, what happened is, because I saved my money, I was worse off. Now, what is the advantages of inflation? For the skilled worker, he could bargain for a higher salary. And as I said here, for the savers, it's bad, whereas here, for the people that borrow, it was good. Because when they want to repay back their loan during inflation, they will be as if they're winning. Okay? They would be better off. Now let's talk about the difference between real income and money or nominal income. A real income is what my income can buy over time, whereas the nominal income, what I actually get as a salary. So this is just small definition about it. Now, what are the costs of inflation on the economy? How does inflation affect the economy? And you can find this in your books in more details on page 366. The first one is extra costs on firms. Okay, so for example, here I would be talking about something called menu costs. What are menu costs? Let's say I, as a restaurant, I was charging for the burger, one burger. My menu was the one burger was for $5. But now, because inflation happened, it means the burger should become more expensive. I will be selling it for $8. I cannot keep it on the menu for 5. So the menu, I will have to change it. So this is an extra cost on me as a firm or as a restaurant. Okay, because I need to update my menus. The second one, how does it affect the economy in a negative way? It reduces competitiveness of exports. As we said, exporting becomes less expensive. I explained it before. So if prices in an exporting country are rising at a faster rate than prices in rival countries, then exports from that country will become less competitive on international markets. And the demand for those exports, as I told you, the dates from the UAE, it will fall because it became more expensive. This will have a negative impact on the balance of payments in the UAE. And this, when I'm talking about the balance of trade, we will be talking about this in the last unit. The third one is it creates economic uncertainty. So it is difficult for me as a consumer and for the firm as the producer to plan ahead. And this is why we said the investment will decrease, employment will decrease, or unemployment will increase, thus growth will decrease. Now there is one term, it's called hyperinflation. It is people lose all confidence in their currency as a medium of exchange and store of value. To me, right now, as a Lebanese citizen, if I can exchange all my Lebanese lira to a different currency, I would do that today. Why? Because I stopped trusting my currency, and I know it will be more than 9,000 Lebanese lira against the dollars. Okay, one dollar equal 9,000 Lebanese lira. I know later on it will become probably 12,000 lira, so I would be losing more. Now, I would like you to take time and please try to answer these questions. Okay, I want you to think about it before we start with the policies in order to control inflation. So, what the government would need to do. So, the policies or solutions that the government might use in order to fight inflation, it would be the government announcing it has a long-term inflation target. So, for example, if I, as a citizen, believe that my government will keep the rate of inflation low and stable in the economy, then I will be less likely to demand a big wage increase each year. Okay, at that point, this will help to reduce the rate at which costs rise, costs of production, salaries, and therefore it reduces pressures on firms to increase their prices. Now, the government could be using also a demand side policy, which is used to decrease aggregate demand. They want people to demand less. When they stop demanding, the firms will have surplus of products and they will have to decrease the price, right? So when they decrease the price, it means they are finding ways to fight inflation. So what would the government do? The first one here, they will be using a contractionary fiscal policy, and it is to reduce public expenditure or raise direct taxes. So they would want to make it more difficult for people to spend money and to buy goods and services to make the prices go low again. Also, what they can do is the government could use a contractionary monetary policy, and it means they will increase interest rates in order to decrease borrowing. When I borrow less, it means I have less money. Less money implies I would demand less. Demand less, it means the prices will go down again. Now, so remember, when I'm talking about demand side policies, the government could be using a contractionary fiscal policy or a contractionary monetary policy. Now, another way the government could be using a supply side policy. And why would they want to do that? Because they want to increase the growth, the economic growth in the country. So what the government would do here is they will be reducing the pressures of inflation that are caused by the increase in total demand. So at that point, the government, if they use what are supply side policies, they, for example, they would be giving subsidies to firms. When they are giving subsidies to firm, at that point, the firms will be able to sell their products at a lower cost. So the prices will be decreasing. This is one example. But however, cost and price inflation need not to accelerate if the total supply of goods and services in an economy is able to expand at the same rate as total demand. So supply side policies designed to achieve this may include the government spending more on training workers. It could be more on decreasing taxes on profits and giving more subsidies to the entrepreneurs. Also, it could be, what are the subsidies here? They could be like financial support or tax incentives, or help them in research and development. And finally, it could be using measures to encourage more competition between firms. When they pay someone to open a new firm competing with the old existing firm, competition will be occurring. This we took it in Unit 3.8. When competition is occurring, this is much better for us as consumers, because these firms that are competing with each other, they will be forced to decrease their prices. Now, finally, what the government could do is direct controls that cap or limit public sector wages and prices in regulated markets. So let's see what that means. I will be explaining number 4 in a while. So here are the notes if you want to write them down. So people will not demand high wages since they believe that their government will keep inflation low. This is for the first target. Now, the demand side policies, what would the government do? We already explained it. So if you want, pause the video and write down these notes. And remember, this would create a problem, which is decrease in output and employment, or increase in unemployment. The third one, it would be using the supply side policies, and here are the notes of it. And finally, this is what I want to explain. It is the direct controls that limit the public sector wages. So, for example, what the government would do, it would decrease the real disposable income of workers working in the public sector. When I have less income, it means I will be demanding less. When I am demanding less, companies, on the other hand, they will be having surplus where they will be forced to decrease their prices. Also, the price firms can charge on markets. It should be regulated by the government. So, for example, if we're talking about the electricity and water supplies, the government here at that point, they will be decreasing the prices of these bills. And finally, it is capping the rate at which regulated firms can increase their prices. Yeah, they do not allow firms to increase their prices as much as they want. Why? Because they want to fight inflation. However, what happens? Remember, if I was a public sector worker and I know that the government is capping the salaries or wages, so what happens is I will be less attracted to work in such a job in the government sector. Now, finally, what is deflation? There are two new terms that I would like you to understand. We have disinflation and we have deflation. Disinflation, it means that the prices are increasing, but at a slower rate. So as you can see, it will be going down. This is the disinflation, okay? Whereas the deflation, it is when it is negative. So at that point here, this is deflation. This is deflation. So when the aggregate demand decreases, what happens? Companies start to compete by decreasing prices, so they will achieve consumer competition. Okay, so disinflation is that point where it is inflation is decreasing but at a lower rate than before, and deflation is when it becomes negative. Why do we have the deflation? What are the causes of deflation? The first one is when you have a surplus of goods and services. So it means you are having as a company, you are having a stock of goods that you are not selling, so you will be forced to decrease the prices, and competition might lead to deflation, increase in labor productivity, which will lead to increase in output, and it means we will be obtaining less average cost. Remember, because when we are more productive workers, it means we can produce more goods and services, decreasing the average cost. And this is a good thing. Increase in technology, also it will increase output. And the fifth one, why do we have deflation? When people are not demanding, companies will be forced to decrease their prices. Now, you might think of deflation being a good thing. Remember, it could be both good and bad. And now we will be discussing the advantages and disadvantages of deflation. So this is an explanation of the consequences of deflation. So why is it bad? Because usually you would think if prices are falling, then it should be a good thing. But as we said, on the contrary, it could be a negative thing. Why? Because increasing supply and like what we said in the previous slide, and competition and productivity and technological advancement, this is a good thing for an economy, and it will lead to less prices of the goods and services. Okay, however, when these prices are decreasing and it stays low for a long period of time, um, due to a slump in aggregate demand, the result would be a malign or sustained deflation. What is a malign or sustained deflation? It is the decrease in the general level of prices in an economy because people are demanding less. So the whole aggregate demand is decreasing. Now have a look at this. What happens is the consumers are delaying their spending because they know that the prices will be falling later on. So now in the present, they will not be spending money. So what happens is firms will be having a stock of unsold goods, so they will be having a surplus. Okay, so their profits, when they have a surplus, their profits will decrease. And at that point, what happens is the firms will cut their production and reduce their workforce. So in other words, they are telling you there will be an increase in unemployment, which is one of the macroeconomic problems. Then when we don't have a job, household income will fall because we have more unemployment, and thus we will be demanding less. Okay? Now, what will the government do to fight deflation? These are the three policies that the government will be using. The government will be decreasing the interest rate, because when they decrease interest rate, what will happen? I will be encouraged to borrow more. And when I borrow more, it means I will have more money, so I will be demanding more again. So we will be increasing aggregate demand, leading prices to increase again. Remember, this would lead to inflation again. So as we said, when we try to fight one problem, it will always lead to another problem in the long run. The second solution, it would be the government will print more money, but still people might not spend because they will wait for lower prices. They know there is a deflation. They know prices will become lower again. Government can use this extra money for new projects to create jobs, because when I am employed, it means I have more money. And when we have more money, what will we do? We will spend more, leading to aggregate demand to increase. So what they are trying to do is increase in aggregate demand. What do we call this type of inflation? Is it a demand pull inflation or a cost push inflation? Remember, increase in aggregate demand. It is somehow a good type of inflation, but it would lead to a problem. And we call it demand pull inflation. And this is the aim of any government in the world. This is what they would try to achieve. There's an important misconception that I would like you to be careful, and I don't want you to do it, because this is a common mistake among students. If I am talking about a reduction in the inflation rate from 6% to, let's say, 4%, it means that prices are still rising, but rising more slowly. Okay? So because the 4% is still high, so I can't say, oh, we are having decrease in prices. No, prices were still rising, but they are rising at a slower rate. Okay? So that would be it for today. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Um, I would like you to add in the comment section one thing that you have learned, or one thing that you would like me to re-explain. Have a lovely day.